I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you around the future state of AI. Obviously, I think there's been a lot of talk in the media. Obviously, we can, be in here talking around Microsoft technology as well. I'm really excited to kind of talk to you around some of the developments and actually, ask, are we ready to start adopting AI? For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Jack Murphy. So I'm the capability lead for AI for Europe at Hitachi Solutions. And as part of this presentation, I talked a bit about education being a key pillar. So I wanted to start this presentation just by making it a little bit engaging. So I'm going to give everybody 10 seconds to count the faces in this image, if you can. Okay, right. Anybody got any guesses? Any hands? 45. Wrong. Yeah. Okay. So there's 26 faces in this image. I'm not sure if anyone actually said that. Sorry, I got thrown. Yeah, of course. Right. Hands up. Hands up. Hands up if you think this is an example of artificial intelligence. Okay. Yeah, some of the Hitachi colleagues. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. All right. So this is an example of computer vision. So actually, within the Alpine presentation, we saw an example of computer vision. This is another example. It took a machine 1 second to calculate the exact amount of faces that are in this photo. Now, you're probably asking, why would I start with this example? But actually, the use cases of computer vision are incredibly broad. So if we think about applying this into a shop, understanding inventory within a shop floor to be able to calculate buying patterns and feed into the wider business estate. What if we think about the amount of containers that are going in and out of a dockyard? Okay, there's a variety of use cases for artificial intelligence and for computer vision. And what's really interesting is that this isn't new, right? This technology has been around before generative AI, before all of this news and talk around what artificial intelligence can do within business. So I want to debunk two things for everybody today. The first is I feel like there's a bit of a nebulous definition of what artificial intelligence is in the media as well as in a lot of everybody's LinkedIn feeds. So a simple definition of artificial intelligence is the ability for machines to perform human cognitive functions. So the ability to see, the ability to speak, the ability to understand language, make decisions. And the second myth around artificial intelligence is that actually it's only become available since the likes of OpenAI's ChatGPT, when actually artificial intelligence was first theorized 67 years ago, nearly 68 years ago. And everybody, I'm sure, I'm based in Manchester, but obviously Turing, the Turing test, right? Is everyone aware of that? So examples of machines being able to actually perform human or to be able to pass a human intelligence test. And then if we think around the field of machine learning, the ability for machines to actually learn from data, established, nearly that's slightly younger than I am, right? So also in 2017, obviously the concept of deep learning and being able to actually create neural networks to solve more advanced data science challenges. And then in 2021, the democratization of AI is what I call this. It's the accessibility, the ability to use foundational models, whether it's large language, whether it's, and I'll talk a little bit more around the concept of a foundational model shortly, but the ability for any organization to actually start using and building more intelligent applications, processes, and solutions. And we talk around this in terms of a, Lego brick piece. These are all forms of artificial intelligence, right? And there's a lot of, I guess, confusion around that, and I wanted it to be, as part of this presentation, a bit of a simplification. It's the application of these solutions that's different, but they are all artificial intelligence wrapped up. Now, there's been a number of breakthroughs, which a lot of you will already be aware of, okay, over the last decade. So if we think about object recognition, right, that's actually an example, of what I showed you in the first couple of slides. Speech recognition, machine translation. everybody, I bet, in this room has used Google Translate at some point, and it has spat out some hilarious content. You know, my favorite example is when I had to communicate with my landlord last year when I was in Paris, and we used Google Translate to communicate. And there was often times where some of the translations that I would get through were just utterly hilarious. But actually, if we think about how artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence is progressing as a field, the release of the OpenAI's Whisper model, which is now available on the Microsoft Azure OpenAI service, which is able to take voice data, so chunks of voice data, and be able to transcribe it into 57 different languages, right, accurately. If we think about presentations that Satya Nadella does, so any Microsoft keynote now, if you pay attention, you'll see that actually using speech service, Satya Nadella's presentations are transcribed in real time using the Azure speech service. There's even examples at Alpine where they're actually using transcription to be able to do sentiment analysis as well, right? That was an example in the last presentation. So these aren't new concepts, right? But what we're going to do is talk around, I guess I'm going to try and demystify for everybody the difference between some of the traditional AI services which you may have seen or may be using within your organization and generative AI, which is what we'll obviously be talking about from the large language and foundational model perspective. So I've tried to summarize these across the human cognitive functions in a way. So obviously, vision, being able to identify objects. Its use cases are vast, but you know, to kind of, I guess, summarize or provide some examples, identity and verification, using OCR to extract information out of documents or paper-based processes. You may have seen examples of this. And the ability to obviously classify and categorize objects from images. Voice. Everyone's heard of Siri, right? Alexa, yeah? Examples of artificial intelligence and being able to transcribe voice into commands. Decision-making. So, again, we saw this in the initial Alpine implementation. And again, like, you know, the concept of machine learning is being used at Rolls-Royce, being used at a variety of organizations to be able to detect anomalies in data, to be able to make predictions out of historical data, to be able to classify information, as well as being able to perform sentiment analysis. And then lastly, obviously, language. And I've talked around some of the advancements using the likes of Whisper and the Azure Speech Service, which are just truly incredible, and some of the use case and applicability. If we think about contact centers, global contact centers, where you have international customers, right? And the use cases where you could actually converse with somebody who's French, and they can speak in their source language, and you can actually then transcribe that, translate that, be able to have a conversation and deliver a better customer outcome. I just think it's incredible, and I just think that where we've come from is just amazing. Let's talk about some examples of generative AI. And there's two things which I think are really important when we're talking about generative AI. So the first is the prompt. Hands up if you know what a prompt is. Yeah? Okay, so for those of you that don't know what a prompt is, in its simplest form, it's an instruction for a machine to be able to perform a particular task. Okay? So there's different types of prompts, and as I'm sure if you were asking a colleague to perform a task, right, in a similar fashion, the more nebulous you are, the less fantastic the output is going to be, all right? So, for example, if I'm asking a language model to be able to write me a tagline for an ice cream shop, then it will provide me with this. But if I provide a tagline saying, provide me a tagline for an ice cream shop, my ice cream shop's name is X, my branding colors are this, I serve these types of ice creams, then I'm obviously going to get better output. Now, this is obviously a very simple example of how a completion would look like. You can use generative AI to be able to generate, as well as summarize, as well as improve vast amounts of content, whether it's documents, whether it's emails, okay? Another pattern is around being able to use generative AI to actually support in terms of knowledge base. And I think this is really fascinating because I think in a future state, a lot of organizations, large language models are going to be the way that customers interface with their organizations. From an initial point, there's obviously always going to be a handoff for specialist issues to be able to transition for niche problems. But if we look at some of the examples of customers where we're working with to actually reduce load on organizations' people to be able to focus on what's important, using the likes of troubleshooting and allowing customers to be able to actually ask the Azure OpenAI service for some first-line support rather than having fully manned contact centers just for first-line support. I think it's fascinating. Now, the next piece, obviously coming from a development background for me, this was an absolute godsend around Codex, the Codex model. So Codex is a model that's been trained on billions of lines of code, and it's only getting better. And Codex allows developers to move faster, be more productive. And the premise of Codex is essentially that based on an English instruction, it'll be able to write you a code snippet. And in future, I genuinely, in the next 5 years, English language is going to be the most popular programming language because the Codex model is being iterated on and it's going to become so advanced. There's, obviously, like with every model, challenges around security of code, but the iterative improvement and investments that are being made in the Codex model is only showing how capable, and we have teams of developers that are using Codex and GitHub Copilot as part of their day-to-day. A really funny example of this is, so I am my family's IT support person. I have been for the last 12 years. And I don't even work in first line, so I mean, it's been a long time, right? I taught my mum how to create a website using Copilot, so using Bing Chat for Enterprise the other day. I actually taught her how to instruct, right, a model to be able to generate her the code. And she literally just copied it into, browser and ran it. Aileen's, test company. I just think that that's really amazing that I was able to educate somebody using artificial intelligence, using a language model to be able to actually show them this is how quickly and this is how we can use this to be more productive. As an educational tool, it's going to be fantastic. And then the last pattern, which is really exciting, this is not the best example because actually DALL-E, the model for obviously content generation, DALL-E 3 has just been released. For anybody who's seen DALL-E before, obviously there's a variety of use cases from content generation, images, being able to create logos, but actually what happens when we start being able to visualize data with DALL-E, what happens when we're able to start being able to create content. It's just going to open up a world of possibilities. So you're probably asking, well, that's a lot, Jack. There's a lot of different business problems there that we could look at solving. And are the technology pillars and foundations here? They absolutely are. And this is something that has been in the making with Microsoft. If you ask or if you look at any interview with Satya Nadella on AI, this has been something that's been in the making from an acquisition standpoint, from a technology roadmap standpoint for the last decade. And there's layers to this. When I'm training colleagues internally, we actually talk around the Microsoft AI onion because there's layers to these solutions and there's layers to each business problem. One thing I'm going to talk about shortly is around aligning the relevant technology to the applicable business problem. But the first layer, okay, is copilots, all right? So I am not being dramatic by saying that I think that copilots are going to change the way that we interface with technology from a productivity standpoint. Is everybody familiar with Copilot? Yeah, everyone's heard, yeah? So obviously, the Microsoft 365 Copilot is going to be generally available to enterprise customers on the 1st of November. There's a Windows 11 rollout for the Windows 11 Copilot starting today, I believe, actually, which is really exciting. And the use cases for Copilot are truly incredible. Not only is it going to allow you to be able to write content straight from Outlook, be able to transcribe meetings, and then be able to, I've seen examples where you're able to analyze sentiment from that particular transcription, be able to ask, okay, our customer had this particular challenge. You can then ask Copilot, how did we solve that challenge? It's going to allow you to create documents based off your data. It's going to allow you to create presentations. It's going to allow you to have a conversation with your data through the Excel Copilots. And Microsoft is rolling out Copilots to the whole stack, actually. So, it's already available, Bing Chat for Enterprise, being able to use so within Power Platform, actually being able to instruct Copilot to be able to build you an app, build you a data model, right? It's incredible. And, 10 years ago, when I started in software development, or 12 years ago, the thought that I would be able to use the English language to build out a tangible solution, right? And you know, the baseline of all of this is a good data strategy, which we'll talk about in a second. But you know, in terms of Microsoft's investment, there's even a Copilot coming to Paint, which I love, right? I mean, it's just great to see. Now, underneath that layer, so you know, there's the productivity piece, but then there's also the, okay, right, so I need to be able to incorporate our existing business application estate. Okay, cool. Sorry, I know I'm running out of time, so everyone needs a coffee. But you know, I've got my own bespoke challenges. I've got my own data estate that I want to start using generative AI on. And Copilots are powered by something called the Azure OpenAI service. Is everyone? So for those who aren't aware of what the Azure OpenAI service is, think of the OpenAI models, right? Such as GPT-3, being able to, ChatGPT, being able to use that. The Azure OpenAI service is a localized, enterprise-secured deployment of those models that you can integrate into your applications and that you can integrate into your Microsoft stack as well. So, you know, you're able to deploy a model of, let's say, for example, GPT-3.5, and you can then use that deployed endpoint and actually plug in through Cognitive or Azure AI Search. You're able to plug in your own data. You're able to use it as part of your AI enrichment process. You're able to publish it to a Power Virtual Agent in seconds, right? So that's the underlying technology that's powering Copilots. But then in between that is something, it's an SDK, it's called Semantic Kernel. And what that allows organizations to do is create their own skills as well. So you're going to be able to create your own pilot with your APIs. You're going to be able to bring your data, your business apps. You're going to be able to leverage these models, and then you're going to be able to convert them to skills and integrate them into these Copilots. It's truly incredible what we're going to be able to do. Now, some statistics, which I just think are wild, is in 2024, Microsoft development activity, 65% of it is going to be low code. And Power Platform, as well as the wider Microsoft business application estate and the advancements that have been made from a low-code perspective, like I said before, I wouldn't have believed that it was possible, but it's really charged by having a platform that allows you to structure your data and scale your application estate. And the other stat, which I just think is crazy, but by 2025, 10% of the world's data will be generated through AI. That is a continent of data, right? So that's something that we need to consider as well as part of when we are adopting these solutions, how that factors into our AI adoption strategy. Now, responsible AI practices is really important. Before I talk about this, I wanted to take a step back and basically, is anybody familiar with a person called Mustafa Suleyman? Yeah, well, you've listened to his book, yeah. So Mustafa Suleyman is probably one of the most important figures in the global AI initiative from an adoption perspective. He's recently just released a book called The Coming Wave. If you are interested in AI, I would highly recommend it as a read. And Mustafa Suleyman was recently asked for a definition on technology. The definition was, technology is the ability to augment human capability. Yeah, so the watches we wear, the glasses we wear to see, they are examples of technology, okay? It's not just digital. But as we all know and have seen, not everybody has that, I guess, pure vision of technology. And actually, it's not just around augmenting. Sometimes technology can be weaponized. And with artificial intelligence, it's exactly the same. Now, we've seen that generative AI has fueled a significant rise in cyber attacks. It is very, very difficult if we think around, central government scenarios, when they are working against people who don't have a responsible AI practice, or if they don't use ethical guardrails for the use of technology. This is something that needs to be factored in. Now, one thing that's really great around the Microsoft stack is that not only are there some technical guardrails available, so content grounding and being able to identify misuse, but there's also a responsible AI maturity framework. Now, Microsoft's responsible AI principles, alongside having good training and practices, good rules, like I said, ethical guardrails around adoption, Microsoft has released a responsible AI maturity framework. And the foundations of the framework are around the privacy and security of data, the inclusiveness, the accountability, transparency, fairness of the service, as well as the reliability and safety of the services for users. Now, this framework is really important, and it's something that we actually factor into our go-to-market strategy when supporting customers on their AI adoption journey, because you need to learn and improve. And there are lots of examples where if you aren't adhering to this framework, it can cause a lot of damage from a reputation perspective, but also from a adoption standpoint, right? If we're not adhering to a responsible practice framework, I'm sure everybody within this room knows around the fact how difficult it can be to adopt any technology. And I've been talking to everyone around the fact that this is a change in the way that we interface with it in general, right? So this is really, really important and something that we factor into our go-to-market propositions. Now, I know that I've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to talk around, look, I've covered quite a lot as part of this presentation, and you might be thinking, where do I even start? So here's where you start. Every organization needs to have a playbook for AI adoption. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. The first is I've probably talked about maybe 7 different AI technology services in this presentation, right? And a critical piece of any technology adoption is around business problems and technology alignment, right? I showed you an example of computer vision. You wouldn't use that for example, generating or reviewing an email. So education is absolutely fundamental, not just for your technology teams, but actually for the users of your services as well, right? Having a good strategy definition, the strategy piece is really important in terms of what is our overall vision, what do we want to use artificial intelligence to support. There's some amazing examples out there of CarMax in the US who used the Azure OpenAI service from a content perspective, and it took the Azure OpenAI service a couple of days to do what one person would take, I think it was 12 or 13 years. So having those measurements and thinking about what you're going to use for, AI for, but then, look, landscape implementations. Every organization is different, but look, data, as we know, and it's been a common theme in all of these, in all of our presentations, data is absolutely fundamental to any AI adoption journey. And if your data is siloed, if your data is on-premise, if your data is incomplete, if it's inaccessible, you're not going to get the most value out of your investment than you would if you take the time to get your data organized. That goes as well to, we've talked around the importance of a business application estate as well as your infrastructure. Having your infrastructure implementation considerations ready. If you don't have any Azure landing zones in place, then obviously this is something that you need to consider. If you've got a on-premise version of CRM, for example, then you need to, or Dynamics, you need to thinking about potentially the Microsoft AIM initiative to get your data onto the cloud. And you also will want to think about, envisioning, having a clear definition. So, someone came up to me, and this is internal, and it is funny, with an idea for an AI use case. So it was, we need some automatic responses for emails. I said, okay, right, cool. What does the email need to say? Oh, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, just different customer name. I said, that's fantastic. We don't need AI to do that, right? That piece of envisioning to actually align, okay, what is a definition of an AI use case is fundamental. And once you've got that strategy, once you've got that playbook defined, a lot of organizations will want to prototype, right? So it's not just going straight to production, it's thinking around, okay, how do we actually prototype and iterate and get a practical simulation of what this technology looks like before deploying to production. And then the last piece is around center of enablement. So thinking around, how do we scale this? How do we implement the relevant governance recommendations, such as our ethical guardrails, to ensure that this is being adopted safely? How do we manage the downstream message to departments who are going to be using this technology. Like I said before, I mean, implementing change in adoption for business applications is difficult enough. When we're changing the dynamic of actually how people interact with technology, we need to factor that in. And then obviously having the right quality assurance gates in place. Having a thorough testing strategy for generative AI solutions as well as the foundational model elements is really important too. I'm just going to finish on this piece. I talked a little bit around why a playbook is important. There's just a couple more reasons. The business problem alignment I've discussed. The cost and the return on investment for AI use cases is fundamental, right? I've talked around the CarMax savings, yeah? But there's, a variety of use cases where actually, starting simple, start with the simplest use case that you can, and then work upwards. Having your governance pillars in place, and having clear patterns of usage for AI services is going to support you on your adoption journey. Now, I appreciate that I've dug into everybody's coffee break time. So what I'm going to do is, instead of holding questions right now, I'm going to let everybody go to the bathroom and have some coffee before we go on the tour of the factory. I'm just going to be stood there, and if anybody has any questions, if anybody wants to have a chat, conversation, I can talk about AI all day. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with any of you. And yeah, we're here until 5. So if you need to come, just come and find me. We'd be happy to have a chat.